And as you're settling in, I want to remind folks that we do record these so that folks have an opportunity to view them at a later time. And we want to know where you're joining us from. I'm sitting in Madison, Wisconsin tonight. So I'm joining from Madison, Wisconsin, where it's a cool fall evening. Well, fall, it's the end of summer, but it feels like fall. So as you're joining us, let us know where you're joining us from. Where are you calling in? And folks, feel free to turn on your camera. We'd love to see your smiling faces. So tonight, for the Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club, we are going to be in the dark a little bit. You'll learn more about that as we get started. My name is Alicia King, and I am the host for the Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club. I'm a volunteer with Environment for the Americas. So my day job is something totally different than Environment for the Americas. But I'm pleased to be here tonight. Joining me tonight is Lauren from Environment for the Americas. She's relatively new to the organization, so we're super excited to have her. And she is going to be the support and brains behind the Bird Book Club tonight. So again, feel free to turn on your camera so we can see your smiley faces. And I see Raleigh, North Carolina, California, New Jersey, Ohio, New Mexico, Colorado, Western Colorado, Bogota, Colombia. So we've got a wide audience. And I'm just want folks to settle in a little bit. And again, reminder, we are recording this. When we record it, we don't necessarily see all of the faces like we see them on the screen. All right, I am going to go ahead and get started. And as I said, my name is Alicia King. I'm a volunteer for Environment for the Americas. And I want to just give a quick little overview about Environment for the Americas. And I've been traveling on the road, so bear with me as I make sure that I'm actually sharing the right PowerPoint presentation. All right, can I get a yes, we see you? All right, nodding heads, yes, you can see my screen. Okay, excellent, thanks for that. All right, so again, this is Environment for the Americas. We really think about protecting, connecting, and inspiring as it's related to birds. So we're committed to connecting diverse people to nature and conservation. We lead global partnerships focused on bird conservation, protecting migratory species and their habitats across international borders. Our program really focuses on nurturing the next generations of conservationists, and we do this through education, outreach, and really creating meaningful opportunities. And one of those opportunities is World Migratory Bird Day. So World Migratory Bird Day is really the cornerstone of our conservation campaign, and it's pretty central to many of our programs. So this particular annual awareness raising initiative highlights the need for conservation of migratory birds and their habitats. So we have a global reach, and we really hope to provide ways that people can really become active and be inspired to conserve both birds and their habitats. And we want you to participate in this by thinking about, are there things you can do education-wise? Are there things you can do public engagement-wise? And what are some joint activities that we can do across borders? You can find more information about Migratory Bird Day and a map where you can see if there's an event going on near you. And we really focus on events in May and October, but really any day is World Migratory Bird Day. I want to make sure that I mention that we, as part of our protecting, connecting, and inspiring, Another thing that we spend a lot of energy on are internship programs. And we do this through partnerships with agencies like the Forest Service, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, and also through other nonprofit organizations or entities or businesses that have a focus on birds. And we really want to make sure that our internship programs are diverse, that we provide experiences and mentorship, and that we really do equip the next generation to think about how we can be really great stewards of our birds and their habitats. And then also, how can younger people develop their conservation careers? So it's really a pretty exciting program. I want to make sure you're aware of some things happening. So we have a September webinar coming up talking about being in the dark. We're going to talk about dark skies and birds. And we have a panel of experts that are going to talk about light pollution impacts. And that happens on Thursday, September 18, in the middle of the day. So you can register, just go online, you can register there and be a part of that. Also want to let you know that we do a variety of travel trips. So a group of us are going to go to Colombia in October. Super excited about that. And we're going to focus on the Bird Friendly City program that Environment for the Americas and American Bird Conservancy is working on. But this international trip to Cuba, there's one space now available. So think about potentially joining that. You just need to reach out to our director, Susan Bonfield, and I think Lauren can put that email in there in case anybody wants to learn more about that Cuba trip. And then I don't think I have to tell you all how important you are to Environment to the Americas. Your support and your ability to share the messages and what we do is so incredibly important. And so you can become a member of Environment for the Americas. You can donate to the Happy Kit. And that's a kit that we take with us or send to Central and South American countries. You can donate money toward binoculars. You can donate airline miles. You can support our internship programs, and you could go shopping. So you can make a purchase, go shopping, and that will benefit us as well. And then you can just outright donate. So we certainly appreciate all of the donations and all of the things that you all do to help us continue to do our work. And one of the things that we want to do is call attention to the fact that so many of you do come regularly to our Bird Book Club, and you do support us in so many ways. And so thank you. These are our flock stars. So we greatly appreciate you joining us each month for the Bird Book Club. And we have a variety. I see familiar. Well, I don't see a whole bunch of faces, but I see some faces, and I see a lot of names that I recognize. So I know there's folks like Carol Myers comes on a regular basis. Judy Freeman comes on a regular basis. Louise, Barbara, Aaron, Nancy, Ken, Martha, Linda, and Carol, Judy, and Louise, and a couple others they are like stars coming on a really regular basis. So thank you, everybody, for doing that. We greatly appreciate it. So enough from me. Now you know a little more about Environment for the Americas. You know about the upcoming things and our flock stars. Let me introduce our author this evening. I am so super excited. And I have to tell you, when I read this book, and I think those of you that join us regularly know kind of my style. So I read the books and I find things that are interesting and I make notes. And you'll notice this time, not only did I just use my little sticky notes, but I have like pages of notes because they had to be on a bigger sticky note because I was really intrigued by some of the things that I was reading. So we'll get to that. But first of all, let me introduce you to Leigh Ann. Her book is Night Magic, and she, of course, you can all read the slides, so you know what I'm going to say. She's contributed to the Washington Post magazine, Smithsonian, Orion, and Oxford American, among other publications. and she's the winner of the Noel Thomas Award. And her work's been cited in 3 editions of the Best American Travel Writing. So and I think this is true, you still live in North Carolina?
Yes, I live in Boone, North Carolina.
Excellent. All right, I am going to escape my slides and we're just going to go. Um, and let me stop sharing because you're probably seeing weird things on my screen. All right, I'm hoping that you're back, that we're back to you just seeing smiley faces and not my screen. All right. Okay, so Leigh Ann, I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit more about you and kind of what your project was and how you got into it. And then I think you're going to read for us, if I'm not mistaken.
So, my book, Night Magic, was inspired by a magazine article that I actually wrote for the Washington Post magazine. So I had an editor that I've worked with there for many years, and I've done a lot of travel pieces for him. And so they did a pandemic travel issue where it was travel writers not traveling. And then the next issue was travel writers traveling close to home. And so he reached out to me for that and he said, Leah, is there anything that you've always wanted to experience in your home region? So, Boone, North Carolina, I'm in Southern Appalachia. And I said, yes, I've always wanted to go see the synchronous fireflies of Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So, those of you that aren't familiar with these fireflies, they're incredibly famous fireflies. Good Morning America features them. They're all over the place. So, every year, tens of thousands of people apply to a lottery to be able to go see these fireflies because that's how popular they've gotten. And so I was able to go, and I thought that synchronous fireflies, it's a species that blinks in unison, and I thought that meant that I was going to get there and these fireflies were just going to go off, on, off. But that's not what they do. So, how they synchronize is you see a little bit of a twinkling, and then there's just a whoosh of light. And then it's a whoosh of light in the other direction. So, these fireflies actually communicate with the firefly next to them, and sort of like a stadium wave, or there's that, light the candle of the person next to you. That's what it looks like. You're watching this light just move across the forest, and it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. And beyond just the actual phenomenon, being able to witness this, I realized that I had never really spent time outdoors in the dark without a flashlight, without any source of light, without looking at my phone, because to experience these fireflies to the, extreme degree, you have to let your night vision adjust. You're out in the dark with hundreds of strangers at this particular event. Everybody's kind of moving around, like jostling around in the dark. And it was a really fantastic experience. And so I spent so much of my life on screens under artificial light to have this time in the dark where I was awake. It's like dark sleep. No, to have like an awakening experience in the dark, it was just incredibly restorative. And so, as part of that experience, I started learning about light pollution and artificial light and how artificial light is disrupting pretty much every part of a firefly's life cycle. And, come to find out, it's basically disrupting the life cycle of pretty much every life form on Earth. And so I learned so much from fireflies. I just started thinking, what could I learn from salamanders and owls and glowworms and moths and bats and bioluminescent fungi and night blooming flowers and all of these living beings that I've never really thought about very much. And so when that piece ran in the magazine, also, I started getting all of these emails, messages from readers who read this story and they were like, loved the Firefly story. It inspired me to turn my porch lights off more often, which just blew my mind because it's so insanely difficult to change a habit, right? And I was moved really that I had written a story that had inspired strangers in far off places to take a direct action that made a direct difference in their home environment. So I set out on this larger quest, and really the quest was for me to kind of understand how to appreciate natural darkness in an age of increasing artificial light. And I tried to do this in a way where it was really about not about what light pollution takes away, but rather what darkness stands to offer. Because I don't really think we have a lot of dark positive stories, and bird lovers, a lot of bird lovers understand, and as I've come to understand, how important darkness is as habitat. We also don't think very much of natural darkness as habitat, but that is what it is, and it's incredibly important for migrating birds. As you were mentioning, migrating birds truly depend on darkness. So, as do we all. So yes, and so I said I've actually never read from my screech owl. There's a whole chapter, whole story about screech owls. Really, it's too much to get into in the webinar, but I mean, it involves an astronomer, a street light, a refugee situation. It's wild. But I did want to just read a little section from from the owl chapter, just to kind of give a feel for the narrative. And also, because this particular passage, bird centric, because this is the Bird Book Club, but it's an example of I it's just things that I never knew. I mean, when I was writing this book, continually I was like, I've got to text a friend about this, I've got to tell somebody about this, did you know, whatever it was, because just kind of blew my mind. I mean, I really came to realize I'd like to think of myself as someone who knows my surroundings, knows the environment around where I live. But what I came to understand is that I only know half of it. I only really know the daylight half. And so I do focus on Southern Appalachia in the book, but I pull in from different places. But I really focus on Southern Appalachia because my dream for the book is that it inspires people to know their own darkness. We talk often about, how light pollution shrouds our view of the stars, but I really think that there's so much of the dark world directly around us that we can stand to discover. So this is part of a chapter where I become acquainted with screech owls, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I will. But I actually think that mourning doves sound a little bit more like stereotypical owls than actual owls. And it is part of this process to just start to recognize and be able to identify bird calls around me without the visual. Bird watching, also bird listening. Um, so anyway, my friends ended up unbelievably had a screech owl nest in their yard, which is such a holy grail of being able to witness. But so I was able to spend a great deal of time with this owl family, thanks to my friends. But so I'm gonna read you just a little bit of this experience. And okay, first time I've ever read this owl section. Okay. Owls' famed night vision employs the same rod and cone systems as human eyes, though they have a greater ratio of rods to cones. Their eyes also dilate to extreme extents to let in available light. They're more open to artificial light, so it stands to acutely harm them. At extreme levels, it can damage their retinas, going beyond hampering sight to limiting vision. The Coopers' neighborhood is so quiet that I can hear the clicking of talons against the tree hole rim when owls land. It's usually the dad that takes care of the feeding, but both parents seem to be at it tonight. 150 grams. That's what a screech owl weighs, Pace says in teacher mode. It's like the equivalent of 30 nickels in your hand. Birders commonly compare animal weight to nickels, but this inspires my friend Sarah to turn on a flashlight so that she might show me an actual coin, gold that's been pressed to fit the curve of her finger. The ring bearing the outline of an owl had been an unexpected gift from her aunt long before these owls moved in. She'd worn it for months before she encountered a stranger on an airplane in flight of all places, who had the same owl image tattooed on her arm. She told me that the owl is modeled after a famous ancient green coin, Sarah recalls. And with that information, a portal to understanding owl's place in Western culture opened for her. The owl is on a 15th century coin she wears. It is known as the Athenian owl. Sarah says reproductions of the coins are more common than you might think. There seems to be a market demand for them, owl levels aplenty. Ever since I started thinking about saw-whet owls living in Appalachia's Sky Islands, ever since I first locked eyes with this resident owl, I've been wondering, why is it that we think of owls as smarter than the average bird? How did they come to be considered wise? In Western culture, this traces back to Athena, ancient goddess of wisdom and courage. In Greek mythology, the owl rides through life on Athena's shoulder. The bird is a nocturnal creature with supreme night vision, allows Athena to view truths that she could not see on her own. In this sense, the Athenian owl is a counterpart to human knowledge, embodiment of what we struggle to access. It is, according to Greek mythology, through tiny owls that darkness communicates its teachings. The city of Athens, Greece, is thought to have been named for Athena, not necessarily because of the goddess's supernatural prowess, but because in ancient times, tiny birds, a small species resembling both saw-whet owls and screech owls, were present in overwhelming numbers. There is a still used adage in Greece that speaks to this history. To needlessly give someone something that they already possess in spades is said to be like giving owls to an Athenian. Even today, in a city once lit by torches that can now be seen as a blob of LED light from space, owls of this lineage nest in the ruins of Athens' ancient darkness. On a street below the Cooper House, someone walks by, whistling a tune. Then the neighborhood goes quiet. Hear them getting stronger now, Sarah says of the unseen owlets. They're just up there chattering. It is a high-pitched melodic sound. Their mother is still away. Their father is off in darkness unknown. We imagine that they are crying, calling out for food, wanting to absorb the heat of their mother's body. Oh, Leigh Ann, Sarah says in a soothing voice. Stay calm. Don't react. Her eyes are trained on something just over my shoulder. Turn around really, really slowly. There's an owl right behind you. I mean, it's really, really close. Anyone who has ever spent time around me knows that staying calm is not my strong suit. I am highly excitable for better and worse. But it feels like the serene overtones of this natural night that's absorbed us might help my body match the tranquility of the moment. Slowly, slowly, I turn. And on a rhododendron branch, barely an arm's length from my body, I see the dark outline of an owl. She is staring at me. I am staring at her. I was at an advantage during our last meeting in lingering daylight, but she's at an advantage here in the deeper end of evening. Her giant eyes are taking in more moonlight than mine. Despite the bird of prey's proximity and talons, the encounter is not intimidating. It feels like a wild world blessing. We have chosen darkness, and this owl has in turn chosen us. Across the dormant fire pit, Sarah swears that from where she's sitting, it looks like the tiny owl is perched directly on my shoulder. So that's just a little piece of the owl chapter, the great saga of the owls, that in night magic. So again, I if you love birds, it's like really important to try to love darkness, I think. And I have a neighbor who it's like, how do you talk about darkness? How do you start to even address this? My neighbor, when I started writing the book, she came over and she said, I'm so excited that you're writing this because my neighbor has this light that's shining right into my bedroom window. And so this is a story over and over again. I hear this. It's like people are like, how do I talk to someone about it? And again, kind of with the positive psychology of it, focusing on discovery and this notion. I tried to think I want to write a book that my neighbor Kristen can slip into our other neighbor's mailbox to start this conversation. Not so much as a scolding, but more of an invitation. And so the book, I hope, is really an invitation to know darkness in a different way, to experience it in a different way. And it's really my personal journey to do that. And it took me a long time to absorb some of the lessons that I ultimately did get out of it. But I would love to hear some questions. I think you had some great questions about the book, and just to get the conversation started.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leigh Ann, for reading that. And I love how excited you are about this. And I love that you read for us, for the Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club, a passage that you had never read for an event before. So thank you for sharing that. And then we do have a lot of wows, and that's beautiful. And oh my
Oh,
gosh, you
good.
guys,
Thank you.
when I read this book, like I said, I always have these notes, and I scribbled a little note saying, well, not everybody's afraid of the dark. And then just feeding off of Leigh Ann's screech owl story. So in the neighborhood, everybody kind of knows that I'm like the bird lady person. And they're all coming up to me and go, have you heard the screech owls? Do you hear the screech owls? Can you hear the screech owls? And it's like multiple neighbors, asking me. And so I went out one night, and there were people walking their dogs just as it's starting to get dark. And I'm like listening for the owls. And it's, people are starting to fade away because it is getting dark. And I'm standing there, and my neighbor next door comes out and she goes, do you want me to turn on the light for you? And I'm like, no, I don't
No,
want
that's actually a
to.
really good way. Over and over again, I just think how, it's a very countercultural book, because it's extremely countercultural to say, I think I'm just gonna go sit in the dark for a little while. You know, it's a really countercultural notion. Whereas, just a couple of generations ago, I mean, this is something that people would have done. This is a relaxing and enjoyable experience, rather than a strange experience that you're going to worry about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
person. Just
yeah.
why would you want to be in the dark? Yeah.
Yeah. So so I just want to point out Mary Ann and Martha are like, wow, wonderful. And that's beautiful. And so much of what you wrote in your book is absolutely beautiful. And oftentimes I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I get started on talking about some of this thing? But first, I want to say that Bruce um, read The Night Magic for the Audubon Society. Oh, I lost him. Here he goes. In Montrose, Colorado. So lots of positive human health effects for sleeping in a darker place. And yes, Bruce, that is so true. And I think, Leigh Ann, that's one of the points that you are trying to make, is that, not only does wildlife and birds and insects and things depend on dark, but it's really, really good for people.
Yes. Oh no. I think we've lost her.
We might have lost Alicia for the moment, but Pamela Carter just added in the chat that last month she read this book and adored it. Her friend and her are planning a night walk soon as they live in the Huron, am I saying that correctly? Huron National Forest in Michigan. And she also took the initiative to dye her bedroom curtains a deep wine color since reading the book, so that at night her bedroom lights are not so dark, which is a wonderful way to take some action at home that is helpful for reducing light pollution outside. Oh, welcome back. There we are, Alicia.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Yes, so I want to make sure we get to Pamela. Pamela, do you want to come on camera, Pamela, and chat about what you have written in the chat, or I can just read it? Up to you. I'll start reading, and oh, there she is.
I was just
Oh,
sharing a little bit about it, but Pamela, I would love to hear more, even if the curtains are nearby.
so in the before I even read the book, sometime earlier in the spring, I have many grandchildren, but one of my grandkids came up and we hung a white sheet outside so that we could see moths outside. And so I love living where I live. I'm able to see the Milky Way on some nights. My vision of stars. I moved here 2.5 years ago from outside of in Metro Detroit. And so it's just so different. But I've been very conscious um, for a long time of like making sure the lights are off outside during migration time for the birds and for the moths too. I switch lights to like yellow lights that are outside, and they're the only one of the few things that are attached to like a smart technology so that I can turn them off and turn them on while I'm driving down the road and click them on so I can get in the house and then turn them right back off. But anyways, I love the book. I loved the book. I called my friend after I finished it and I said, we need to go for a walk at night. I haven't done it. I don't want to do it by myself, but I haven't done it, and let's do this. So we're planning that soon. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for reading them. I'm so excited to hear all of the kind of ways that it connects with your life. And also, in the book, that heel toe, that when I go on a night walk with Tal Galton, he's a naturalist guide who leads night walks. And one of the tips, just for everybody else that hasn't read the book, one of the things he talks about is you want to do a pronounced heel toe so you don't trip over things in the dark. And I'm like, there are all these little practical things that you can learn. And again, it's exciting. I hope you have a great night walk. And part is like my son who appears in the book, but every when we go on these night walks out, often we go outside and it's like our night vision, like I like let it adjust as the night grows darker. Because a lot of people are really surprised to learn that while we do gain the most night vision in the first 20 or 30 minutes, that we actually gain night vision for hours incrementally. So yeah, it's my favorite thing. Like, you might have powers that you don't even know about if you've never pointedly set out to do this. And I love the curtain story in particular because it really did take me my whole journey to kind of recognize, in chapter 1, I start to realize I should put those curtains up to protect fireflies and to, like to not have light trespass out of my windows. But it wasn't until the end, after watching all of these different species react to light and then realizing that I also am an animal that reacts to light, to where I realized that I was drawing the light around myself. And so I started changing lights, not in here for the Zoom call, but changing lights out in my house, after dusk. I mean, I changed to the amber lights inside even, and the red lights. But Pamela, thank you so much for reading, and everyone who's read the book. I just appreciate that so much, and I love knowing that it's setting you off on these adventures of your own. That's thrilling.
Yeah, no, it is great when we have, well, one of the things that you wrote in your book about, just the kind of the feeling of this, and it's on page 42 for those of you that might have your book handy. It felt so powerful. And when you think about the power, like, Pamela making a change and making a difference. And then Carol has a little story. We'll get to you in a second, Carol, about nighttime. But you write, Wendy, as you're writing, Wendy says, "Wow, I feel so full." And I loved that because it's like, wow, you feeling so full. And I think that's something that sometimes we have to be taught. It's like you said, and you have somebody who's guiding you on night walks. And it made me think, oh gosh, maybe we should offer more night walks because I love that sentiment. Wow, I feel so full. I drew a little, you can't really see it. I drew a little heart by it.
I love it. I'll have to tell Wendy that she got hearted. Yeah.
So,
But so really just
share these books, like I'll give them to a local nature center or a school or something, and I'm sure they get the books and they're like, why are there little hearts and little questions and little exclamation marks on all these things?
That's great though. But yeah, so in that experience, we were witnessing salamanders, salamander migrations. We had found an ephemeral pool, which is really amazing. And so it's really full of wonder. I mean, we were, all of these things that were right in the backyard. Because again, I think sometimes we think that everything's been discovered or known, and when in fact there's so many things to discover right outside our doors, like a parallel universe when the sun sets. Yeah.
Okay, I have something, a story I want to talk about in the book. I have a couple more things, but let's get to, I just want to make sure, Carol, I don't know if you want to come on and say what you have or if you want me to just read it. And then Carrie has something that she wants us to talk a little bit more about. So I'm just going to read Carol. So she volunteers at a local wetland in Southeast Florida, and their naturalist leads night stalker walks once a month for the public on the 1 mile boardwalk. And she starts the short program in the nature center talking about eye shine, etc. Night stalkers is a huge draw and always has a waiting list. I love that. And then she just started your book, and she LOVE in all caps it. Thank you for writing it. So thank you, Carol, for sharing that. And then Carrie,
Yeah.
do you want to come on camera, Carrie, or do you want me to ask you a question?
I can. Been
Excellent.
reading. I just been loving this book, and I was at the part was talking about the Sky Islands, and I did a little research and saw that the forest you described as being in Arizona and Mexico. So I want to know further about your usage of it in your book, because I'm just trying to picture this. And then salamander. So you talk about the ethereal pools, they lay eggs, but what happens after that? I didn't get to do my research further on that. That after legs are laid, they go off again and do their migration and go under the ground. My husband got to see, and my daughters were doing back country backpacking to Crystal Lake near Durango, and they got to see the tiger salamanders, and he said they were huge, swimming, and I got some video, which is really cool because it correlated with me reading that chapter of the book because I just started it, and that really got me intrigued. I was thinking more about the salamander, but you know how life happens; you just don't get to do your research on that. So I just wanted your input on that, and I love your enthusiasm on this topic as well.
So much. I had to take notes because I want to answer these questions. So Sky Islands, I've actually looked at the exact page I think that you found on the Park Service. So Appalachia's Sky Islands are remnant boreal forests that, basically with glacial retreat, it's like these little kind of remnant habitats that have been left over. And they're remnant habitats, they're super high elevation, and like saw-whet owls, which are typically only found a lot in the northeast. They can be found specifically on these Sky Islands, which is really just the tip top of the mountain, where they have tree species that you would typically find up north because they're just remnant habitat, and they literally are, kind of think of rising above the clouds, these remnant habitats. And so spotted salamanders and ephemeral pools. So for those of you that haven't read the book, ephemeral pools are temporary, they're like temporary habitats. So these temporary pools that in spring, snow melt and rain creates these pools that don't, because they're temporary, fish don't have time to establish population. So a lot of different species gravitate to these pools to reproduce. So it's an extreme concentration of life. One of my favorites species that I discovered while chasing the spotted salamander, which does, they come out from underground only during this spring migration to visit these pools. And when they leave, Carrie, they leave these pools and they do just go back underground. So they come out to breed in the pools, they hide under leaves, kind of try to stay cool, and then after this breeding is done, they do go back underground. It's a very quick, but one of my favorite species are called fairy shrimp. So I had no idea that these fairy shrimp existed. So fairy shrimp, and this is like, again, this is 2 miles from my house at a place that I've walked by a million times. I have walked by these ephemeral pools, didn't even know they were there because they dry up in all other seasons. But in spring, these fairy shrimp, they're a type of brine shrimp, and they're these like magical little creatures, and they just, it's so fun to watch them, and it's hard to even find a good video of them or anything. Super tiny, but they just float around in the water. And they're actually, if you have ever seen sea monkeys, they are actually relatives of sea monkeys. And so in the book, I'm kind of like, I always wanted sea monkeys. I always wanted to write off in the comic books to get sea monkeys. And it's like, okay, come to find out, like I was living with sea monkeys all around me, and I didn't know, in these temporary magical night pools. So really, how can you not think of it as a cauldron of magic? Just all of this life bubbling up. But so that's where the salamanders go. And Sky Islands, Appalachia's Sky Islands specifically, are fascinating, and it's really an interesting climate story as well as a habitat story. So if you wanted to read more about that, specifically Appalachia's Sky Islands.
And Leigh Ann, would you not recommend to people that they consider visiting the Smoky Mountains because of the diversity and the high number of salamanders and the opportunity to do a lottery to get you to see the firefly type things?
Well, top secret. I mean, not, but kind of like insider secret. I mean, one of the most wonderful things about this book is that, or this journey that I took in the book, I mean, I'm convinced there are synchronous fireflies in pockets all over this region. There are blue ghost fireflies, which are my favorite fireflies. Neon blue, stay lit for 60 seconds. So they're like little fairies floating around you. They are in pockets all over this region. Spoiler alert, I only found them, in the next county over from where I live. I found them in my own neighborhood at a place that I'd driven by for 20 years with my headlights on at night for 20 years, but I'd never walked my own road in complete darkness with my eyes totally adjusted. So, I mean, Southern Appalachia is such a place that's rich with life. We are kind of the salamander capital. So, I mean, it's true. So many wonderful things. But one of the things that I hope comes through in the book again is that this is where I live and I only knew half of it. So wherever you are, truly, I really, really believe this. Wherever you are, there are like magnificent, wondrous things right outside your door that appear that you can only see in the dark. And that's one of the other things that I loved about fireflies, kind of as my teachers, because they reminded me, that we think of darkness as shrouding, but sometimes darkness reveals things. And so kind of over and over again to think of darkness as habitat that is rich with life. I think it also helps when we're talking about how do we reduce light pollution. I mean, to start thinking about darkness everywhere as a habitat rich with life kind of helps us start to understand why it's important to turn those lights down. But not only, because we know that that's the right thing to do, but also because it's just really cool to experience it. And I think that's enticing for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to make sure we just acknowledge Martha's comment. She was talking about the Hitchcock Center for the Environment in Amherst, Massachusetts, tagging monarch butterflies and sending them on their migration route. And they get updates on the sighting of the monarchs, which is just so super cool. And if you've never had the opportunity to tag a monarch, I highly recommend that you do that because it's just really incredible. And they had a moth program where they had a sheet up and they saw a whole bunch of different moths. And that is really incredibly cool to do that. And I'm one of those persons that cringes every time I go to an outdoor nighttime party and they have that lantern that, attracts the insects, the bug zapper thing. I'm just like, oh, I can't, I don't know if I can stay. But anyway, and then I want to acknowledge that Carmen says your enthusiasm comes across in the book, and she enjoyed the fairy shrimp description, which gives me a great segue to say, You talk a little bit in your book about you were out and about and you got accused of being a fairy. So tell us a little bit about that, because cannot you guys all imagine her being this fairy flitting about the forest? I mean, right?
That actually happened at the Firefly event. And it was like, there's so many people and just kind of wandering around. And I went down to a river and I kind of popped back up from the river and there were these two little girls and it was like they're just like, oh my gosh. And they're with their mom and it's like she just came out of nowhere. She must be a fairy. Um and so a lot of times, when you see things like bioluminescent mushrooms or blue ghost fireflies, I mean, honestly, there's so many different things that come up in the book where you think about folklore and stories, and you just kind of think, well, maybe this is kind of where the stories of fairies come from, or from witnessing, all these phenomena. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was a cute story. I was like, oh, I could just picture that. Now, one of the other things that you mention in your book, you talk about glowworms, glowworms squirming. But you all, as she's starting this chapter, she like, I wrote this note with a little funny little frowny face. Well, I guess it's a smiley laughy face, but she she started talking about maggots, and I'm like, oh man, do I even want to read this chapter? So what was up with that? What was the connection there for the glowworm squirming, and why
Well,
did you connect it to
I
maggots?
really hope that you're won over and that you would now actually like to see glowworms. Would you like to see glowworms now?
Absolutely.
So this is like my job was accomplished. So I've started to think of myself, I'm kind of a PR agent for maggots, aka glowworms, way more charismatic of a term, and bats and moths. And it really, like, when you start thinking about nocturnal creatures, I mean, a lot of night loving animals have a bad reputation. I mean, really, for example, moths. I mean, I am now. I attended as part of my research. I attended an event called Mothapalooza, and at Mothapalooza they sell T-shirts. It's like Crazy Moth Lady, and I really wish I would have gotten one of these T-shirts because I am like all in. Like, I love moths. People love butterflies, and I love butterflies. I love monarchs. Actually, I've been to their overwintering site in Mexico, and it was one of the most meaningful encounters of my life. Really, being in a forest with those monarchs. But moths are so underrated. They don't get the credit they deserve. In the book, I talk about this a little bit, but all my life, I would see a caterpillar and I thought, oh, this is going to become a butterfly. But actually, almost every time you see a caterpillar, it is going to become a moth. And moths are beautiful. They are so diverse. We have hundreds of species of butterflies in North America. We have over 11,000 species of moths. So these moths are seriously making the world as we sleep. These moths and these caterpillars, they create the world that we appreciate in daylight. And the other thing is, for bird lovers, moths and these caterpillars, the birds are depending on these moths, like, extremely, as for their diet. So I don't know, moths, unsung heroes of our world. And also bats. Don't even get me started. Like bats were they were probably the species that made me most nervous. But I went in and I went to an event called Bat Blitz, and I said, okay, I'm kind of bat neutral right now, but I really want to be bat positive. And ultimately, I think this was accomplished. But so, PR agent for maggots, bats, moths, I'm here. I hope to represent them well because they deserve it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Caterpillar Lab.
Oh, Caterpillar Lab is it so I is they attended Mothapalooza, and if you look up Caterpillar Lab, you'll see what they do. But I mean, they create educational programming. They're up in the Northeast, but they travel with their programming. And one of the cool things they do is they will pluck a caterpillar out of obscurity, and they will um, use cameras and put them on a movie screen so that you can watch the activities of a caterpillar. And they can even take leaf miner caterpillars, which I didn't know about leaf miner caterpillars, but when you see those the spindly little signs in a leaf, that's the leaf miner caterpillars. They can take those and project them on movie screens, and you can watch these caterpillars go through leaves, and it's really beautiful. A beautiful experience, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So I'm looking, just make sure I don't miss anybody that might have a question. You get a lot of that's beautiful and so cool and stuff, and love Luna moths, and oh my God, they are really exceptional. But tell us, tell us a little bit about moon gardens.
Oh, yeah. So moon gardens. I mean, really, you know, this book is sort of like the book that I think I wrote the book that I wanted to read, that I needed to read. And when I think kind of about the chapters, hard to pick a favorite, but Moon Garden chapter, even now, when I feel like I read it and it kind of transports me back to my experiences of spending time in my friend Amy's moon garden. It's just such a glorious experience. We talked earlier about artificial light and how it affects human sleep, and there's all of these health situations connected to artificial light. But I had really known that circadian rhythm, it's not just about our sleep. Our human bodies have circadian rhythm with so many different things, including our sense of smell. So one of the beautiful things that happens is actually our sense of smell. When you think evolutionary, like when we need to be most alert, but our sense of smell rises right around dusk when night blooming flowers are starting to relax their petals and open. And so it's just like this glorious meeting of the senses, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And so my friend Amy, who's in the book, she kind of accidentally planted a moon garden. It's like, how do you accidentally plant a moon garden? But so she lives in one of the oldest houses in our county, and so it was built pre-electrification. And she's the kind of person, if she's going to change a doorknob, she wants a historic doorknob. If she's changing whatever she's doing, she wants to do it historically. So she planted a garden in accordance with things that were planted by the original inhabitants. And I mean, she has read people's journals, she has done the research. And so when she planted this garden, she hadn't really realized it, but in time she was like, okay, this was planted pre-electrification, and it was a garden that was created for enjoyment at dusk and in the evening, because people would spend time outside in their gardens at that time. Pre-electrification, it was a moon garden kind of planted for entertainment in a sense. And it takes into account, visuals, because, often people will plant white blooms, and night bloomers are known for their fragrance, things that reflect. But even, you'll have plants that are soft to the touch, just really just a sensory rich garden that is frequented by, giant hawk moths the size of hummingbirds, which can be unexpected if you've never, seen a moth in its natural environment. That is to say, the dark, as opposed to, beating itself against an artificial light. It's really a serene experience to encounter a moth like that. And I think a lot of times people are like, oh, moths, because that's the only time they've encountered them is when the moth is kind of frantically, trying to figure out what to do with the light, as opposed to being in its natural environment. So moon gardens can be such a wondrous experience. And also, there's a guy who wrote an entire book on moon gardens, who started his moon garden just in with potted plants on his balcony in New York City. So this is, again, it's not, you can very small spaces. You don't necessarily need like whole fields, although I will say common evening primrose looks like nothing in daylight, grows in ditches all over the continent, And at night, they have a little latch that just pops, and they just like like watching a time-lapse video, and they just twirl open. And so it's really it seems so wild. We think of flowers as being in sunlit meadows with butterflies. So to think of flowers as needing darkness and kind of relaxing in that environment, it's such a kind of a flip-flop of the way that we tend to think about light and dark. And again, plants also depend on darkness. You know, we're getting ready to have fall leaves changing, dropping, and we tend to think of that as related to temperature, but it's also related to the lengthening nights, to the growing darkness. And so in areas with light pollution, they've actually found that trees kind of forget to drop their leaves. They forget to change. So every living being on earth basically depends on darkness. And it's an enjoyable thing to experience. Darkness can be.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And I'm sure we could probably talk for a whole nother hour, but our time's almost up. We only have a couple minutes. So I just want to make sure that I let folks know Nancy has put a number of things in the chat. And just one point that she brings up is that lights facing down. So in areas where we do, you know, feel like we need the light, or it's a safety issue for people walking in, you know, streets and things like that, pointing them down, it doesn't get away from the things, you know, that are on the ground, but it helps to reduce the light above. And Nancy brought up the Bird City program, which is incredibly important to get people engaged. And then Carmen saying that she hasn't gotten to the Moon Garden chapter yet, and is wondering if you cover a specific flower. So Carmen, we're going to leave that up to you to discover as you read that chapter. But I do want to just close with, oh my gosh, Leigh Ann, thank you so much for joining in this evening. Thanks for writing this book, and thank you so much for your enthusiasm. It's so contagious. And I want to say that you've got on page 200 of your book, for those of you that might have it in front of you, but on page 200, when you're talking about learning to walk. And I feel like that was something that I gained from your book, was not only just the way that you write your stories and talk about the really cool stuff that you've learned and that you've, you know, shared with people, but learning to walk. And I, you have in here, how's everybody feeling about walking in the dark? And sometimes it can be a little scary walking in the dark, but I highly recommend it. And I feel like it goes along with, you know, that one of the things when I was reading that part of the chapter, I was like, yeah, learning to walk. It's like learning to walk in a different way and being able to take in all of the things that you might not have thought, you know, previously. And then it made me think of, you know, oh yeah, stop and smell the roses. And what I actually wrote down was stop and smell and see the night.
You know, people, you know, in terms of being afraid of the dark, at Bat Blitz, I met a woman who is known kind of as the Bat Lady, and she said to me, she was talking about bats, but I think this also applies to darkness. But she said, if you're afraid of something, it means that you probably have something to learn from it. And so I just love that, and I feel like I've learned so much from darkness. And I thank you all so much for the close reading, and also in terms of fixtures and different bulbs you can use. Dark Sky International has some great resources about that. But truly, it's been such a delight to be with you tonight, and I appreciate you all so much for reading and talking about the book, and just yeah, like I really, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for spreading the word and just you know, going on adventures.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us. We will see you next month when we are going to talk about the Birding Dictionary by Rosemary Moscow. And I put the link in, at least I hope the link works for you so that you can register for that. It's September 25th, same time. So same deal. We'll look forward to seeing you all there. Thanks again for joining us. And thank you, Leigh Ann. Everybody have an absolutely great night. And I hope you go out and walk a little bit in the dark. tonight.
And if those of you that have read the book, if you feel moved to write a review on Amazon or Goodreads, and you can write those reviews no matter where you get your book, and I think it really does make a difference. They're really meaningful in terms of kind of just keeping the conversation going and bringing people to the book and kind of the larger cause. So thanks so much, everybody, and it was so nice to be with you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Have a great
care.
night.